Hello everyone and welcome back, not just to the Damage Report, but to Big News Wednesdays. The day is so big, they necessitated a move to 90-minute shows. So that's what's new. We're only in our second one of those. You know what's the same as always? Jayar Jackson's presence. Jayar, how's it going?
You know, it just gotta stay the same, bro. You know, don't change anything up. Let's people
exactly
take what it is, you know?
Anyway,
I still got my I've got my 2 Strong coffee still, because apparently now I've become another Jank, is what I've been called on Twitter, or is it Instagram? I've been called another Jank because I decided to post about how awesome this coffee was, which I thought honestly that the folks that are running that would think Jayar is kind of talking trash about 2 Strong coffee.
Did you see we're allowed to if we want to.
Did you see it?
No, I didn't see.
I said I'm mad that I like it.
This isn't talking trash, but I have my 2 Strong mug. This isn't 2 Strong in it right now. I don't have any right now, but it's good. Anyway, and it's caffeinated. Usually the coffee behind the scenes, coffee I drink on the show is usually decaf at this point in the day, but I have a pretty big headache, so I'm rolling the dice on it being about needing more caffeine. Anyway, thank you for being here, Jayar. This is very much a Big News Wednesday. We have got so much to talk about, including bombing resuming against Palestine, a new federal holiday, Fox News's next big obsession, what's gonna happen with infrastructure, and meanwhile in returns, news from around the globe coming up. And then if there's time, this big expose into the working conditions in Amazon. I know, like their PR would convince you that everything's all great now, they're paying $15 an hour. Turns out there are other issues that we need to be aware of. So all of that is coming up. Thank you everyone for being here, regardless of what platform you're on. Please hit the like button, share the stream so that more people know that the show is live and they can come join, discuss, push for progressive values, all of that. And we've got other stuff that we're gonna be announcing throughout, including, oh, by the way, I'm gonna say this right off the bat. After the show today, you know what happens? Same thing happens every day. Indisputable with Dr. Rashad Richey. It's gonna be awesome. You're not gonna wanna miss it. Joined by V, formerly Eve Ensler, gonna be the guest. Brandon Tatum is a conservative host who he's going to be debating. He's just going through the ranks of these conservative hosts, debating them. And Benjamin Dixon is going to be co-hosting. So Dr. Rashad Richey, Ben Dixon, that sounds like a pretty good show. I think you're gonna want to see that.
I think so.
So with that, Jayar, you ready to do this thing?
I'm down.
Let's do it. Oh, really fast. Before we jump into it, I know Biden's meeting with Putin, and we're gonna cover it on the main show later, and probably on the Damage Report tomorrow. But there's not much at this point. Like it's all breaking news, literally happening right now. I'm sure stuff is happening, but the stuff earlier today, it was like body language analysis and like. I don't need that in my soul today. So we'll get to it at some point.
The things that were breaking in the room were cameras, potentially some of the reporters' noses when that brawl broke out.
Yeah, there's a brawl. I don't have much to say about the brawl. In fact, what I just said, that's all I have to say about the brawl. So with that, let's turn to other world news. We had a bit of a gap where the Israeli attacks on Palestine had ceased. The rockets from Hamas seem to have ceased as well. We had a changeover in the Israeli government, but the tensions were still there. In fact, they seem to be getting worse, as you can see in this little video. A group of people chanting "Death to Arabs" at a nationalist march. Let's take a look. Okay, so if you ever, like go to a march and you find yourself in a group of people that are chanting that a group should all be murdered, don't be a part of that group. That's a bad group. You don't want to be part of that. But unfortunately, that sentiment is out there, and the government seemed to want to oblige, and so they launched attacks. Strikes were eventually committed against Palestine once again. The Israeli military saying just really early today, for our news cycle, it was yesterday, but that they conducted airstrikes in the Gaza Strip after saying that Hamas had sent incendiary balloons into southern Israel from Gaza. So I don't know. Look, I don't know what Hamas did. I don't know how many balloons they had. I don't know what the balloons did. We don't even have, as of when I was checking, actual knowledge about the casualties that were caused by the Israeli military airstrikes, let alone the balloons. But we are into a new government here, Jayar, but there's a possibility that the new government is going to want to, show its base that it is just as, lustful for the blood of Palestinians as the last one.
Yeah, I mean, I guess let's not miss the part that these are still politicians, and you see crowds like this that are chanting death to Arabs, and maybe some portions of these politicians believe they have to satisfy those folks' needs or their thoughts and desires, especially when it comes through this type of time when there's this transition of government. We saw it just here. There's always a bit of a tedious moment, especially since it's so close of an election to happen, that allows us where the kind of power struggle is a little bit shaky, and you're not really sure if you're going to continue to keep it. Netanyahu's on the side talking about how we're going to be lying in wait to make sure that we have another chance to beat the opposition right now, and then get a chance to run our government again. I mean, similar types of statements like what Donald Trump has been saying. I'm just waiting until 2024. I'm coming back in, and that keeps the energy around the folks that supported him in its types of policies to make sure he gets back into power. So all of this is probably playing on the heads of a lot of these politicians to think, well, what do we do now to make sure that we're not seen as the bad guys, or we're not seen as opposition to what most people want? And sure, I mean, a couple of balloons, and I don't want to downplay because I don't know what the balloons do, but apparently setting some fires to some fields, potentially triggered by some demonstrations to brag about how they're taking more land. All this stuff just brews beneath the surface until we start seeing rockets get launched again, and people die again. Then it turns into the same narrative, but we never get to the point of stopping the things that get us to those points. I mean, look, we had the ceasefire a couple weeks ago, and ever since then, not nobody, but a significant number of people stopped talking about it, right? And that could be included people that I agree with and like and everything. It's just the nature of the game, right? And then that's when things like this get to brewing again under the surface. How do you really keep track of such a thing, especially from where we are and our position and things that we're used to talking about?
Yeah, and look, my worry about the transition, at least, partly it's that, yeah, I think a lot of the media has sort of checked out. And one of my worries is when you have like this big thing happens, conflict again, we're covering it every night, and then there's like a brief period. If it starts again, it feels often like, oh, well, but we're not gonna do it again, like, right, in terms of the coverage. I often worry about that. Like, taking a brief break can be a way to stop the momentum of media coverage of an issue. But my worry here is really about what Joe Biden is going to do if this is just the first in a number of missile strikes against Palestine. Because when the new Naftali Bennett became the prime minister, there are all these reports coming out of the White House saying this is an opportunity for us to start to change our relationship and all that. Like, my worry is that he is going to want to show this new government, both the prime minister and the ruling coalition in the parliament, that we still have their back and everything. So is he going to be, whereas the relationship with Benjamin Netanyahu, that was a very long running thing. There was a lot of historical inertia there. So I'm a little bit worried about what the response is going to be. But that said, coming out of that chant that we showed you and the fact that these nationalist marches are happening, there are other politicians, not Joe Biden, who are coming out vigorously against that. So I want to give credit to Jamal Bowman, who said this is a genocidal chant, let's call it what it is. I represent many within the Jewish community who disavow and condemn this hateful language. So why does only a small portion of our Congress? It's a great question. And Rashida Tlaib tweeted, after racist and violent deaths to Arabs marches earlier today in Jerusalem, children in Gaza are being woken by bombs in the middle of the night. Israel's government doesn't value Palestinian lives. It has managed a decades-long ethnic cleansing project funded by the US. And that final point is a good one. It might be that Biden, even if he wanted to change our relationship with Israel, try to push for increased concern for the lives of Palestinians, which I don't take as a given that he will. Even if he were to, there's only so much directly we can make the Israeli government do when it comes to Palestine. We do have a lot of power, we don't often use it, but even then there's limits. But what we definitely can do is stop funding the bombs that are killing the people. or at the very least put some sort of requirements in terms of their use or considerations of human rights, whatever, for continued military support, both in direct cash payments and weapons and technology and things like that. But we're not doing literally any of those things. This is a wide spectrum of possible responses. We're not even in the same room as the spectrum, let alone on it.
Yeah.
Any further thoughts?
No, I was looking for there's a potential point of the statement, because I read it the other day from Biden when Naftali Bennett came in, and it mentioned the peace between Palestinians and Israelis at the very end, in the very last sentence or two. The whole rest of it was talking about we're going to continue this support and relationship with one of our staunchest Middle East allies. Normal stuff you would hear, and we're going to make sure we preserve, the Israelis' right to defend itself. The same similar thing. So, as far as wondering if the relationship's going to change with a different leader, no. As far as from our perspective, at least, it's a matter of continuing that relationship for our benefit and from our side, not necessarily to make sure that the peace is happening. You can see it from the levels of importance that go through the statement. The things at the end are kind of like the wrap up, and we had to throw that in there. At least that's what it feels like to me. So the relationship is going to be the same.
I think that you might be onto something. And certainly this isn't right now, it's sort of timed with Biden's off doing his meeting. There's the G7, there's Putin and all that. Is he really going to be engaging that much with what's going on with Israel and Palestine? Doesn't seem like it. But that said, we are going to take our first break, because when we come back, we've got a lot. Not just the establishment of a new national holiday, but some right-wing crying about the fact that it will be a holiday, as well as more on what the right wing is trying to use, both to bamboozle their audience as well as fight back against increased understanding of the systemic racism in the US government. We've got that for you and more after this. Okay, more news for you as we launch on this next topic. The US is gonna have a new national holiday now, with the Senate unanimously passing a bill Tuesday. Unanimous, they don't often do that. Just yesterday, that would make Juneteenth or June 19th a federal holiday commemorating the end of slavery in the United States. It commemorates specifically when the last enslaved African Americans learned that they were free. Confederate soldiers surrendered in April of 1865, but word didn't actually reach the last enslaved black people until June 19th, when Union soldiers brought the news of freedom to Galveston, Texas. I know I probably say this like literally every time we talk about that fact, about the origin of it, but isn't it amazing that like months of additional slavery, the news hasn't gotten here yet. Is that amazing? It's like when you read about how, sorry, Jayar, what are you gonna say?
It's fine, just think about the people who died in those couple months, who were continually abused, separated, whatever, raped, maimed, killed, all that stuff that happened on a regular basis, the things that continue to happen even though they were technically free,
Yeah, and of course, even on that day, it's not like, oh, good, I'm gonna go to my apartment then. Like, obviously it took like 140 years and counting to deal with the fallout of all of that. But yeah, that is fairly amazing. Now, it becoming a new national holiday is fairly significant. It becomes only the 12th federal holiday. It's expected to easily pass the House. I wouldn't take anything for granted, but it seems like this one should be a layup, which would then send it to President Joe Biden for his signature. And I kind of think he's gonna sign it. So that is good. We've got a statement from Senator Ed Markey, one of the, again, unanimous senators who voted for it, saying, we have a long road towards national justice in the United States, and we cannot get there without acknowledging our nation's original sin of slavery. It is long past time to make Juneteenth a federal holiday, which it will now be. So that is good. The fact that it was unanimous, even better. I mean, even the hate crimes legislation from earlier this year, they couldn't quite get that, with Josh Hawley being the one to vote against. So Jayar, what do you think about this?
It's surprising, I gotta be honest. That it's been talked about before as something to actually celebrate and recognize as something that was changed in the country. But the problem, I think, the reason why it's been so delayed is because with this recognition comes a conversation of what happened. No, you can't say, oh, we ended something without saying what something is. And we have a very long history of not talking about what it is, because it was horrible, and it continues to not be addressed. It continues to not be acknowledged as the legacy that it continued on to hold on this country to this day. To this day, which we'll talk about the critical race theory later, won't we?
Oh, we will.
So the opposition for things like the teachings of it go hand in hand with recognizing what it is. It just makes sense, you know. Look, we recognize the 4th of July. We recognize all this, the revolutionary stuff. We recognize that with so much pride, with fireworks and celebrations and the day off and drinking and beers and barbecues and all that. And then it's a celebration of who we are. We don't want to celebrate this because it shows who we are and who we were and our legacy of that. And so it's about time. And honestly, you should be proud of it. So the people who say things like, hey, if we talk about this, it's telling Americans we suck. You're kind of joining in, you're kind of indicting yourself to say that you suck. Nobody said you suck. We said what we used to do in this country sucks and we needed to fix it. So anyway, the recognition of it is long gone, and people who don't like it are gonna stick their heads up and raise their hand and show, hey, I'm the POS that doesn't like this.
Yeah, well, and we're gonna have some of those for you, but thankfully, at least in the Senate, like, so someone on Twitch just said the reason it was unanimous is because it's just a gesture, it's not actual policy, which I get it, it's a fine point. That said, Republicans have long stood even against these sorts of gestures. Like the path for, you know, Martin Luther King Jr. Like to become a holiday. Like what was that like for decades because of Republicans? So this is actually better by comparison. But that said, I agree. It shouldn't just be a day to like have a hot dog or whatever. It has to be substantive. Like you said, it's supposed to be a celebration of who we actually are. And we're talking about it now, and we've got a little bit more for you. But that said, we can only talk so much. But you know where you can get a bunch more that recognizes all of this? That's on our Juneteenth special happening on Friday, June 18th. It's gonna be our 3rd annual Juneteenth special. The first hour hosted by the amazing Ben Dixon. Jayar Jackson is actually gonna be hosting the 2nd hour, and there's gonna be an amazing suite of guests. A ton of awesome people, Dr. Rashada Ritchie, Jason Carr, Charles Coleman, Wazi Lambre, Wisdom Cole. You've got academics, you've got communicators, you've got activists. We're gonna be talking about voter outreach, diversity in politics, representation, reparations, a number of different issues. This is 8 p.m. Eastern time, 5 p.m. Pacific time, Friday, June 18th. On Juneteenth, which will now be a federal holiday. It almost didn't get there though, Jayar, because in the past, some have had an issue with it. Not because of the substance of it, not because of anything having to do with it. It's totally other stuff though. For instance, Ron Johnson, who you probably know recently from being crazy about the Capitol attack. So back in July 2020, there was an attempt to establish this as a holiday. Bear in mind, that was under a Republican Senate with a Republican president. It was stopped because Ron Johnson objected to its passage. Now he said that he has supported resolutions recognizing the significance of Juneteenth, but he was concerned the new holiday would give federal employees another day off. So Jayar, it's not that he's racist, it's that he hates working people and he doesn't want them to ever rest.
He doesn't want,
clear about it.
Yeah, federal employees should not have the day off. I'm sorry, do you have more from him before I start talking about this guy?
This is enough out of him, I think.
The entirety of the US Congress in DC goes home for the entire month of August. They go home for the entire month of August. Not once every 4 years, not once every 10 years. Every August, they do not work. It's called the August recess. And now my kids in elementary school, you know how long recess is? 30, 45 minutes, if that long, I think 30 minutes. They get a month off every year. Now is Ron Johnson going, you know what? I'm tired of us legislators getting an entire month off. You know, we're federal workers. We don't deserve a month off why do we have a month off every year? You have a month off every year because you get it off and that's been established and it's just the norm now. No one questions it anymore. But you don't object to that. By the way, the whole point of this is you're supposed to go home and talk to your constituents and really get in with the people and understand what they want and need. We know that's not happening because politicians don't represent anyone except for their donors. So this whole idea that these workers can't take another one day off to recognize something like this is I've paused from cussing 4 times now. It's total BS. It's just it's outright, and he knows it is. He doesn't have to even try and mask it. But the people who like him are okay with that.
Yeah. By the way, take away most of their recesses. I know that there's legitimate need for some of it. They're supposed to go to their districts and actually work for their constituents. Let's bear in mind they mostly don't do that. I think it should be way harder to be a representative in terms of time off, in terms of pay and all that. Let's make it more difficult so that more of them get burned out and don't just sit there for their whole life. It should be difficult. You should want to get into it because you care that much. You're willing to do this grueling work. You get in, you grind it out, you get some achievements, and then if it ever becomes not worth it to you, like you don't care so much to do the work, get the hell out of there and let someone else do the job. It shouldn't be something that most of its recess. Anyway, let's turn now to another angle on this. So Juneteenth is now going to be a federal holiday. Most people, I think that's a pretty good thing. It's a recognition of an incredibly important historical event, a time to perhaps reflect on the history of slavery and all of that, or the work that we still need to do. Not everyone on social media was so happy to see it. And I just wanted to point out this. It's one of those, like, you could plug in like 1,000 different white conservatives that do like YouTube channels for the Daily Wire, the Daily Caller. I don't even know, but this whiny thing just got to me from Matt Walsh, who said, after hearing about Juneteenth for the first time 14 seconds ago, it is now deeply meaningful and important to me, and I feel passionately that this day, whatever it is, ought to be celebrated not just in America, but across the earth and the entire solar system. So there he's attempting to be clever, because right-wingers are very funny, and mocking that people take this holiday seriously or think that it's worthy of some sort of recognition. He's not saying it's not. He's just saying people are too excited about this, and that's weird. And he tried to point out, again, jokes that you have to explain to this extent are the best sorts of jokes. So he goes on to say, you should thank me for giving some of you the chance to show off your anti-racist bona fides in the comments by bragging about how long you've known of and celebrated Juneteenth. I can see some are already taking advantage of this opportunity. You're welcome. See, he's not sad and whiny about it becoming a holiday. He's laughing, and all of his friends are laughing right out of frame. You can't see them, but they're all laughing at this. And it's just, like, he can't come out and say, I love slavery, it's awesome, we should have it again. But he wants to send a signal to his audience that you shouldn't be happy about this. This isn't progress. We shouldn't acknowledge something like Juneteenth. We're gonna be pissy about it. Man, people are saying they care about it, but they didn't even know about it. Well, that's one reason, by the way, to have a goddamn holiday is so that people learn about these sorts of things. A lot of our holidays are commemorating things from decades and decades and decades ago, or hundreds of years ago. And if they weren't holidays, maybe kids growing up in school wouldn't learn so much about them. But for him, it's just, I have to have something out there to whine about.
Because Americans know everything about Christopher Columbus and that holiday that's celebrated.
Yeah, it affects our lives every day.
Yeah, and they celebrate Veterans Day. Yes, on all these holidays where we have these things set aside for whatever reason, some good, some pointless, like Christopher Columbus Day. People still recognize it and then post their things about how they honor people who have done things that they never did, or sacrificed what they never sacrificed, or contributed to the country the way that they haven't, or maybe that they would like to. All these things that you would inspire to help people make this country a better place. Now, if you want to point out how much you don't know about a holiday, about a significant portion of the entire country being freed from bondage, then that's just up to you to point out how much of an ignorant a-hole that you can be. So you just learned about it 14 seconds ago. I think that's part of the problem there, Matt. And the problem is the rest of people that are gonna be commenting on your thread, also that same problem. Let's ignore the fact that we enslaved people for this many years and built the nation on that enslavement. Let's celebrate the fact that we don't care about that. Let's celebrate the fact we don't know when it ended. Let's celebrate the fact that we didn't want it to end. Let's keep it real. That in order for it to end, we had to have a civil war for that to happen. And the flag of the traitorous separatist group from the country still flies in many states in this country.
That is true.
Because they don't know about the history of enslaving people and also fighting for their lives to make sure it didn't end.
Yeah.
That's the history you don't want to know about. That's history you just learned about 14 seconds ago. And because you learned about it 14 seconds ago, you're the good guy or you the dumbass?
I think we know. Yeah, and in the country you also have this continued effort to try to reframe slavery as a thing that wasn't so bad. Maybe it's important that we do actually focus on it a little bit more. By the way, I just want to give one more example of the sort of the pathetic psychological thing that leads to his tweet. I remembered an example of this, and it was when the movie Black Panther had come out and people were like excited about it, you know? And so Ben Shapiro had to tweet this: Wakanda does not exist. Because like he can't help but reveal himself. It bothers him so much that people were happy, that they had something that they liked. For some people, there was a thing that they could like, and he just sat there and he just has to say something and try to ruin it. How dare you be happy about a movie? It's just pathetic, but also revealing. So I appreciate an opportunity to get to know these weirdos a little bit more.
Oddly, Ben Shapiro should be telling his audience, what else doesn't exist? Donald Trump's second term, that apparently a lot of people believe exists or believe is coming back in a month or whenever the hell they think it's coming back. So yes, everyone knows Wakanda is a fictional place. Do your supporters know that Donald Trump is a criminal and has been voted out of office? Do they know that? No, they don't know it because people like you won't tell them that.
Exactly. So let's move on to the broader version. We were talking about this effort to try to stop people from knowing about this. Let's move a little bit more into that. We told you recently that the right and Fox News have become very focused on critical race theory. It's difficult to avoid how focused they are on it, but I want to thank Media Matters for doing a sort of statistical analysis of how much they've been talking about it, and it is way worse than I even thought. Here are the mentions of critical race theory on Fox News going back from this month back to February. And you can see that, even into halfway through March or whatever, it's talked about very little. That's a couple of references on this chart. Let's leave this chart up so that people can see. It then starts to spike, and then it goes down, and then from there, Jesus. They've talked about it more than 1,300 times. That's not the name critical race theory. That is conversations about critical race theory. It is now in 1 week something they will talk about literally hundreds of times. And look, I appreciate this potentially driving a little bit of the hysteria around Satan and all of that from the right, if this is what they focus on instead of QAnon and all that. But there's a downside to it too, especially when this, and let's just remind people, it is an academic framework, a lens to look at history that focuses on the fact that there has been systemic racism that is simply undeniable. So that academic lens has been described by people like Tucker Carlson as a cult. Host Will Cain said it is modern day Jim Crow, which is, that's something. Fox contributor Miranda Devine claimed that teaching the theory would warp the minds of American children and is a recipe for social upheaval and mental illness. Acknowledging the truth is how you get mental illness. Fox's Newt Gingrich said it was driven by people who want to brainwash your child. So they're very opposed to people brainwashing your child, telling them what to think or limiting what they can think about, which is why 21 states have either introduced bans or have already banned what they call critical race theory, even in states and schools that didn't teach it. So they are so focused on making sure that kids don't learn about these sorts of things that they're banning it in places where they weren't learning about these sorts of things. So we have more, Jayar, but what do you think?
History repeats itself, and the reasons why education gets limited now are the same reasons why education got limited in previous years here. Again, since we're talking about enslaved people, they weren't allowed to learn. They weren't allowed to read, write, pick up a book, learn about their surroundings, develop another skill that could get them something else in life, because the overseers and the people who control things knew that knowledge and access to opportunity is power, and things can change from that, as we've seen. Because look, black folks can hold certain positions now. Black folks can do other things legally now that literally legally they were not allowed to do, like read, bro. So the powers that be know that education and knowing something gets you somewhere. So now, when there's education about something else that may get more people, not just enslaved folks, even white folks, which is an even bigger problem, if they get educated on the lives and the history of other people that were once absolutely like nearly decimated in this country, brought here for that whole purpose, treated like animals. If they learn about it, they might start doing something different. And what the powers that be can't do is have the people that they've tricked into hating these other folks now learn their real history and do something different. This is a very big threat to them. Yeah. Just as much of a threat for people to start learning anything, the people that they were looking to enslave and continue treating like animals. So if you have now your people that you've convinced that none of that is any reason to learn about, if they start learning about it, you're losing real bad now. You can still shun the folks that know about it and tell you about it because they're just black people. They don't really need to be heard. That's not a racist thought process to go about at all. So the whole spike in talking about critical race theory on Fox News is absolutely planned to make sure that we quell this education. Education is the enemy of this kind of government, this kind of overseeing, this kind of detriment to our society. They just don't want that.
Yeah, well, it's easy for Jayar to focus on the positives of teaching, but what about the negatives? After I learned, for instance, about the massacre in Tulsa, sometimes when I'd be walking down the street, I felt like someone was watching me. It's causing all sorts of issues. Anyway, yes, you're totally right. You know what? Let's focus on one example of this because we can throw out like 21 states are introducing bans or have banned it. Well, let's focus on what one looks like. Texas has now banned the teaching of critical race theory, something that was, of course, not taught in virtually any schools in Texas. But that said, this just signed Texas legislation. The Texas governor signed it very recently. States social studies teachers in public K-12 schools may not be compelled. Hold on, let's pause for 1 second. The theme of this is a ban on critical race theory. And I want you to see the breadth of what this would actually ban. Because I want people to understand virtually none of this has anything to do with critical race theory. What it has to do with is anything having to do with race, racism, systemic racism, any conversation that touches on this obvious important part of American history and our current political and cultural system. So, public K-12 school social studies teachers may not be compelled to talk about current events or public policy or social issues considered controversial. If they do talk about such things, they are required to present the issue without giving deference to any one perspective. So they say critical race theory, this is anything public policy, current events, social issues that are controversial. Well, you might be asking, what's controversial? Whatever they want to be controversial. And if you do talk about it, you can't give deference to one perspective. So, if we were talking about whether the earth is flat or not, some say it's flat, some say it's not. I'm not giving deference to any one position. They all have facts on their side. So enjoy that education coming to your kids. But it goes beyond even that. They can't make it part of a course to talk about the concept that one race or sex is inherently superior to another race or sex, which is the most weaselly thing to do because it sounds like, oh good, well we wouldn't want our teachers to teach that someone's better. No, that's not what they're banning. They're banning talk about that people think one is better than the other. So if you teach about misogyny, you teach about white supremacy, you're teaching about the concept that one group is better than another. So you can't do that. It is not actually stopping racism. It is shielding racists, misogynists, Islamophobes, homophobes, any phobe you want is gonna be protected by this because you can't talk about the source of their hatred, fear, and xenophobia. So isn't that fun? You can't talk about the concept that someone could be discriminated against or receive adverse treatment solely or partly because of the individual's race, which literally just means you can't talk about racism. You can't talk about any bias that infringes on someone's life. Presumably they'll have some sort of, you can talk about the fact that it's harder to be a white male than anything else in the country. They'll find some way to grant you that. And you can't talk about the concept that an individual's moral character, standing, or worth is necessarily determined by the individual's race or sex. So they are saying they want to ban the generally grad school specific academic lens of critical race theory. They're banning any discussion about any bias, any bigotry, any hatred whatsoever, and anything controversial. So get ready for a whole bunch of just watching everything that a teacher says, and a bunch of Fox News stories are gonna crop up. They're gonna try to get people fired for talk about civil rights, about literally anything you can think of.
Imagine this being about any other genocidal organization or genocidal government institution. About pick one.
You can't teach about the Nazis.
Pick Jewish folks being murdered.
You can't teach about the Holocaust.
Can't teach about Holocaust. Can't teach about Armenian genocide. Can't teach about anything that happens to a group of oppressed people, because you might make the oppressors look bad. That's all this is. You might make the oppressors and the people who support what the oppressors did for a long time and then eventually ended because of violence, because of actual like physical pushback. The only reason why any of these things ended is because of that, and you can't talk about it. Or you might make the bad guys look bad. Yep. What does that make you? Makes you one of the bad guys. It's outrageous. Now, again, and if this was across the board, if this was getting Spike talk about on Fox News, about how much we can't talk about how bad Hitler and the Nazis were, and the reasons why World War II led to what it led to, I think you might have a large group of Americans go, wait, what? Why? Wait, what are you trying to hide? What are you covering up? Why do you hate Jewish folks? This is some anti-Semitic teachings that are going on here, and they'd be right in saying so. Yeah. For some reason, and I know that reason, we don't have that same kind of anger and pushback when it comes to this type of legislation. Of course, many of us do, but as a broad range in the country, we don't. And the only reason for that is because from that institution, we continue holding these negative thoughts about these folks that were oppressed, murdered, and enslaved for this long, that we still don't like them enough to teach what happened to them. That lives. If you don't like teaching about what happened, you don't like the people that were enslaved. It's just straight up. If it happens with any other group that has gone through a genocide, it's automatic that you're pointed out as being, oh, you must have been for that. This is the only way, at least in this country, this is the one group, I'm sorry, besides Native Americans, that's the original one. The only group besides Native Americans where we can see and document the things that we did to them and then still support the people that did it to them.
Yep.
And we wanna learn about it. Just learn about it is a problem. Why is that? Who were you trying to protect?
I think we know those people and their descendants. Sometimes they're literal descendants. You bring up a good point though. I have just a little bit more, I apologize. It's just, oh God, it's so fascinating. A little bit more I wanna talk about this. I feel the need to ask the question, what can't the opposition to critical race theory do? It's become like the miracle solution to every Republican problem. And by the way, you don't even have to know what it is as you're doing it. And we're gonna get to that in just a second. But as an example of what can't it do, what if, for instance, you weren't satisfied to just ban the teaching of critical race theory? You're not even satisfied to just to ban the teaching of racism. What if, like, I don't know, you need to oppose like someone entering the Biden administration or something? Well, you might say, oh, well, something having to do with education or critical race theory? No. What if, for instance, you wanted to oppose the nominee for the Office of Personnel Management, this bureaucratic position? Can you find a way to make it about critical race theory? Well, if you're Mitch McConnell, you can. Let's take a look.
The Department of Education's latest proposed priorities run roughshod over existing history and civics programs established with bipartisan support in order to push critical race theory on public school students and keep pace with woke sensibilities.
God, I'm not hungry anymore after him going woke sensibilities. Anyway, yeah, is she gonna be there to?
That's all he does.
Sometimes turtle stroking lettuce. Is she gonna be there to do something to do with critical race theory? No. But that's the reason to oppose her. Something, critical race theory. Insert a noun, insert a verb, critical race theory, and you're good. And as I pointed out, they don't even know what it is. And I wanna demonstrate that. Okay, if you're making the claim that they don't know what this is, you can't just say it, you have to bring the documents. So here is a quote from Nebraska Governor Pete Ricketts, who said, so this is the full quote. So the critical race theory, and I can't think of the author right off the top of my head who wrote about this, really had a theory that at the high level, is one that really starts creating those divisions between us about defining who we are based on race and that sort of thing, and really not about how to bring us together as Americans rather than and dividing us, and also having a lot of very socialist type ideas about how that would be implemented in our state. Sorry, I gotta wipe the bits of brain that are leaking out of my ear. What are you talking about? It's about the division and setting up the thing, and there's socialism too. What are you talking about? It's not about socialism at all. Like I have the characters on Always Sunny in Philadelphia explain government policy better than Nebraska Governor Pete Ricketts, but he's not gonna stop a complete lack of knowledge about anything having to do with critical race theory from stopping him from then making bold claims like critical race theory is an attack on our country's core values. What exactly is the core value that's being attacked by something that's critical of racism? Could it be racism?
Crazy.
That's what it seems like. Critical pedophile theory is really an attack on our country's core values. Wait, what? What? But in this case, they think they can get away with it.
Yeah, well, this thing is, you can talk about how racist the country is. You just can't talk about it in a negative way. You can talk about how racist our country is and go, but that's good. And people go, okay, as long as you're celebrating us, you can say all that you want. Because he just said it. It is against the core values of our nation. Talking about eradicating and addressing racism is against the core values of our country. That's the reason why, number one, he has no idea what it is. That's obvious. The people that do want to make sure they don't say what it is. That's just, and maybe he does know, and this is why he rambled for so long. He's trying to come up with some kind of alternative definition that scares people. That's why, okay, I'm gonna show you the points in this. The high level, so that means high up people that are powerful coming to get you are doing this. High up level, because Americans have this thing in their stomachs because they feel like we're all fighting a revolutionary war in 2021. Oh my God, the high level coming for us. Let's go kill someone. Okay, the high level's there. Divisions. Now, the divisions aren't from the people who actually literally told other human beings that they're not humans, or that fought a war to keep enslaving people. That's not a division. The people who want to point it out are the divisive ones, who are based on race, this sort of thing, not to bring us together. They want to bring us together. We're bringing together. They're trying to divide us. All these things are digging into the pit of people's stomachs. And let's toss in Marxism, socialism, and all that stuff just to scare them at the end, to make sure that they know, oh my God, and they're Marxists and socialists too. Yep. Oh my God, they're coming for us from a high level and they're trying to divide us while we're trying to keep everyone together. And I don't remember her name though. Come on.
And I don't remember where I read this article that said, great point, Jayar. Unfortunately, okay, we do have to take our second break. When we come back though,
hey John, can we do something off topic of this? Because this is ruining.
Oh, we're turning to infrastructure after this, so not necessarily going to make you any happier. But we are going to be talking about what's going to happen with reconciliation, the bipartisan group, all of that and more after this. Okay, a little bit more news for you, but before we get to that, there's two things I want to address. One, I want to send a special birthday shout out to Annie, who turns 60 today. Happy 60th birthday, Annie. And also, I think it's time, thank you, Jayar. I think it's time to give the pet of the week shout out, which we normally only do on the Instagram, but there was a special request. So can we bring up, let's see, Mishti. This is producer Ashwarya's dog. Do we have the photo? We don't have the photo of Mishti, no. Well, happy birthday to Mishti. Pet of the week, hopes to be a dragon one day.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to step on Mishti's birthday shout out. I'll let you finish. I stepped on you.
I'm good, thank you, Mishti.
Mishti is a great looking dog. That's one of those dogs.
That is a good looking dog.
What breed is that? Like, I don't do that a lot. I'll stop and ask one, what kind of dog is that? Because I'm horrible at dog breeds. And he's just a good looking dog.
Yeah, I often want to do that, but I don't like approaching people, especially if it's like a woman walking their dog, like having someone like me walking up like, hey, what's your dog breed? And they don't get, no, I'm not interested in you. I really just want to know more about your dog, but I avoid doing it whenever possible. Anyway, with that, let's jump into our last story of this first hour. That picture of Biden smiling, you're not getting infrastructure, are you? What's going to happen with infrastructure? Well, it depends on who you ask. The White House has told House Democrats yesterday that they should get ready to go it alone on infrastructure if bipartisan talks flounder. First of all, shouldn't they have been doing this whole time? But anyway, so they're basically saying, and the top officials have told the Senate, Democratic senators, that they have about 7 to 10 days to reach a bipartisan agreement. And if they don't do that, then it's time for reconciliation, which is going to be a fraught process all its own. Now, we do have the bipartisan group who has their deal. I don't know what Biden's gonna do in regard to that. It's about a $1 trillion deal, of which only about 600 billion is even new spending anyway. But that deals purely with physical infrastructure projects such as roads, bridges, and waterways. Its costs would be offset, and this is the part that annoys me the most, fees on electric vehicles and indexing the gas tax to inflation, which just means increasing the gas tax. It would not include any tax increases on corporations. So we're gonna give you less, we're gonna fix less, and we're gonna charge you for it rather than corporations. So you're gonna pay more for your gas. If you get an electric car, something that would actually help us to fight climate change, we're gonna give you an extra tax for that, just so we can stop corporations from being taxed at what they were taxed just 4 years ago. So that's the bipartisan deal. We don't know if it's actually gonna happen, but Jayar, Democrats are now saying, okay, well maybe we pass that, and then we have a separate bill that does the non-physical infrastructure, because definitely Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema will vote for that after doing the one with the Republicans. What do you think?
Everything that we're trying to do as far as legislation through this country, with currently, when you have this kind of opposition, is just constant giveaways and constant trust in people that have told you over and over again how much they are not to be trusted. That what their true intentions are to get none of this done. What makes any of them believe that because if they split this up and do it different ways and go for this bipartisan route, that that's something that will help? That's the first thing that you're supposed to be doing, right? And they're not doing any of it. Instead, it's the worry about making sure that the folks who've told you over and over again, we want nothing done. In fact, we want to go backwards. That we're the people that are worthy of being negotiated with. The Kyrsten Sinemas Kyrsten Sinemas and the Joe Manchins of the world, why would they agree to the next thing that they said they don't want in a separate bill? What does that mean? Who cares? So we're gonna separate what they said they don't want to do? Why? Who cares?
Yeah.
Now, also by the way, this whole thing about the White House telling the House Democrats to get ready to go in it alone, you can have these conversations without talking to the Hill. You can say, hey, we're gonna give Senate negotiators 7 to 10 more days to reach a bipartisan agreement. Why do we need to tell the Hill that? It's only to make sure that we're telling Republicans, hey, you guys, in 7 to 10 days, we're gonna finally start doing something different. Prepare, not just House Democrats. Hey, Republicans, prepare your media talking points, sharpen your knives, and make sure you come after us for everything else that has nothing to do with what we're actually trying to do to offset it. Why are you showing your hand like this? It's really weird.
It does feel like that. By the way, we got a super chat from Luck Dragon who says, I'm gonna be pissed if I have to pay a higher tax on my Tesla rather than Elon being properly taxed. Or at the very least, to avoid Tesla being taxed, your Tesla will get taxed. But the thing.
Yeah, how much are they still talking about that whole report about how the richest in the country literally pay nothing?
Oh, we're gonna talk about it right after this break, actually.
And that revelation, and now we're just not talking about it.
Nope, they're not. But we're going to, actually. That's our next story. But anyway, yeah, I don't have any faith that there would be 50 votes, even for reconciliation bill, for the actual climate focused part of this afterward. I don't know why anyone would have any faith in that. I don't even know that they necessarily can do it, because the Senate parliamentarian, who's stronger than Thanos apparently, says you only get one more. So who's to say we'll even be able to do it via reconciliation? And even then you wouldn't get the votes. So no, it all has to be here. And like people have been saying, no climate, no deal. It has to be a true infrastructure bill. If Biden fails on this, he's failed on literally everything. Okay, unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this first hour. So thank you to our linear audience. We appreciate you being here. For those of you on Twitch and on YouTube, we've got more coming up for you, a number of different stories, including Meanwhile In. We got so much to talk about, so please don't go anywhere, including what Jayar was just alluding to. We've got that after a short break. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the last third of the Damage Report. Thank you for being here. Before we jump back in the news, another reminder, in about 30 minutes, a little bit less than that. We've got Dr. Rashad Ritchie's Indisputable is coming up. You're not gonna wanna miss that. This Friday is our 3rd annual Juneteenth special. That is exciting. But you know what else is exciting? And I just found out about this, I believe it was yesterday. A new event coming, the Economic Justice Town Hall. This is the upcoming TYT event. Cenk Uygur is gonna be doing it with Senator Nina Turner, with Killer Mike. It's gonna be June 26th in Cleveland, Ohio. You can go to tyt.com/events to find out more information. Tickets are gonna be available this Thursday, June 17th. So they're coming up very soon. They're gonna be limited tickets, obviously. But you can go to tyt.com/events to find out future updates about this event, updates on events other than this. But there's gonna be a great conversation between Killer Mike, Cenk Uygur, and Nina Turner about basically how we fight in terms of media and politics for economic justice. They're gonna be talking about living wages, healthcare, education, criminal justice, and more. Like, we haven't been doing events for like a year. This is the one that you're gonna wanna come back for. I think it's gonna be a lot of fun if you happen to be in the area. And with that said, why don't we jump back into the news? Yes. Earlier this week, there was this massive expose of information from ProPublica about what taxes billionaires actually pay. And it turns out basically nothing. Most of the wealthiest people in America pay about 1% or even less in effective actual taxes. Some of them pay about 0.1%. This should be the scandal, the economic scandal of the year. It's the Panama Papers for taxation in America, effectively. And as much will probably come of it, because the only real response that we've seen is anger at ProPublica for doing the work and for the people who leaked them the tax information that it was based on. And that is continuing. We have Mitch McConnell, obviously very powerful politician. He's not mad about the tax avoidance. He's not mad about these billionaires getting away with economic murder. Listen to what he's mad about.
1 week ago today, the personal financial information of several prominent Americans was made public in only the latest leak of sensitive data from the Internal Revenue Service. Or to put another way, it appears that an anonymous source committed a felony by releasing the confidential information of American citizens. So I joined Ranking Member Grassley and Ranking Member Crapo to demand that the Department of Justice and the FBI immediately investigate last week's leak and aggressively pursue criminal charges against those who are responsible. Actual consequences as a matter of justice and as a practical deterrent.
Okay, so they definitely want the deterrent, Jayar. They don't want people leaking stuff like this. But as a matter of justice, this topic that we're talking about, this is the part of it that you think lacks justice, not that these billionaires extract so much out of us, grinding down the working class to build up this impossible, almost purely theoretical digital wealth. And they don't pay, they don't contribute to the system. They don't pay back for that. That's not an issue. It's that someone leaked a piece of paper with their gigantic numbers full of zeros to ProPublica. That's interesting.
A few thoughts. First, I don't care what Mitch McConnell says. That man's name is Mike Crapo. Okay, whatever. Not Crapo. It's Crapo. So, I mean, you know, I didn't name him. So, number two, this is what happens when you have people in these positions of power. They feel that they can completely change the absolute narrative and reality that people see right in front of their faces. Zero acknowledgement of what it reported. 100% talking about who did it and how illegal that was. And how now we have to make sure we go get them to deter more people from squealing on people who are literal criminals. Maybe they're endorsed by politicians and the powers that be, sure, but they're criminals for the rest of the country. You know what that says? That says us that are controlling this whole situation are the only ones that matter here. This is a country that talked about democracy and equal rights and opportunity, but the people that run it are like, listen, wait, you mean you wanna know what's happening? Get out of here with that. This is our country, not yours. You're here to serve us. That's all Mitch McConnell is saying. How dare they tell us that we have to be accountable for the things that we do? And by the way, the reason he doesn't want to look into these investigations as to what actually is happening and how it's been endorsed is because he's part of it. The criminals don't want the crime investigated. You think he's surprised? You think he saw that report and said, oh my God, billionaires aren't paying anything?
Nope.
We don't have to do anything about this. What he did was, oh crap, Poe, somebody reported about what's going on. We have to stop this because I've endorsed it. And my third point on this, they like to talk about when poor people aren't paying taxes. They like to talk about when poor people get unemployment check. They like to talk about how poor people get SNAP benefits. And then they want to talk about how much they're paying back into the system, whether or not they can get this stuff. They paid 0% in effective taxes because they made $15,000 last year. That's who they're attacking. That's who they're worried about, who's paying their taxes. Those are the people they said don't deserve to get anything from this country because they don't contribute anything to this country. What about the people who are taking billions from the country and then not paying anything for it? Those people are okay. Those people need protection, and the people who tell on those are the criminals. That's this country that we live in.
Yeah, they need protection and they're getting it. Why would he want this to be talked about? Like, this is mission accomplished for him. This is the system he's been trying to set up. He doesn't want people to talk. Isn't it amazing? They never do. Like, it's never like, wow, I don't want them revealing this information. But that said, I guess now we have to deal with it. Never. It doesn't matter if it's Snowden. It doesn't matter if it's Manning. It doesn't matter if it's Reality Winner, or in this case, we don't know who the individual is. Let's just completely avoid the actual substance of it, and then just crack down on the fact that there was a leaker. And look, it is unauthorized disclosures of confidential tax information are illegal. That said, if you have it, do it. No, honestly, do it. Are you allowed to encourage people to do it? I don't know. And you can do it to ProPublica. They do a lot of good work. Or if you have information that would be enlightening to the American people, albeit damaging to the US government, Ken Klippenstein is always a great guy for you to contact on Telegram and Signal and all that. So we need this information to have even a chance of actually changing something. Not a guarantee, as we're seeing right now when it comes to this tax investigation, but is at least a first step. That said, let's jump into. Or did you have another thing to say?
No, I don't. I'm so over this. And honestly, I don't have much faith anything else will happen. There's whistleblower protections. There's things all time to make sure that if you do something that's normally considered illegal, there's protections for you to do it because of the reasons that you broke that law is for the betterment of the rest of society or just for yourself. Man, we got self-defense laws. So if someone comes at you with a knife and has already attempted to swing and stab at you and maybe even got you a couple times, if you retaliate and take them out, we have this whole thing in this country where the first thing we say is, well, was it self-defense? Because there's a reason why you broke that law of assaulting someone. So there's a reason that the law was broken about telling these tax secrets. It's so that everyone else can know what's happening and we can adjust and maybe do this weird thing like make the country better. No, we don't want that.
I'm sick of this thing too, as you said. That's one of the reasons that on Monday, Francesca and I did our top 10 reasons to still be optimistic despite all of this nonsense. That's available on YouTube to our tier 2 and tier 3 members. So if you need a little bit of optimism, we've got that for you.
I can tell why you didn't have me on that one because I would have had zero things to say.
It was difficult for me and her. Anyway, that said, time is running short. Do we have time for the F block? Okay, we're gonna do a brief F block and then we're gonna get into meanwhile in. So let's jump into this. The country is reopening. In many places, you don't need to wear a mask anymore. It's not mandated by the state. In fact, LA recently changed that, I believe, just yesterday. That said, you still might need to in certain establishments. Businesses are allowed to protect their employees by requiring masks. And so the big trend of the last year, getting insanely mad at people for just doing their job and asking you to wear a mask, that continues, leading to a ton of conflict, including sometimes death. And so we have an instance of that, incredibly tragic. An Atlanta area grocery store cashier was killed and 3 other people were injured in a shooting following a dispute over a face mask policy in the supermarket on Monday. The suspect got into an argument with a cashier about his face mask before leaving the store without making a purchase. He immediately returned inside, pulled out a handgun, and shot the cashier. A reserve deputy who worked part-time as security for the store and was wearing a bulletproof vest then exchanged gunfire with the suspect, and both were injured as a bullet grazed a second cashier. Officers arrested the suspect as he tried to crawl out the supermarket door. So another situation where everything else being exactly equal, even including his insanity over masks, if you just hadn't had a gun in that case, a person wouldn't have died. That's what guns do. They make it so that people can be killed who wouldn't otherwise be killed. But let's also focus on the masks. This guy was so infuriated by being asked to wear a mask that he didn't just leave, he wanted to kill someone over it. That is what the anti-mask propaganda and rhetoric that's been spread over the past year has produced. We can't point to any one particular rant. We can't point to any one particular right-wing personality or Instagram post or whatever. But this person died as a result of the accumulated mass of that.
Yep, because there's countless versions. The reason why you can't point to one particular one is because they're all over the place, and that's the idea. Once you've built up this cult think process, where if somebody says, "Hey, put on a mask," then it becomes some kind of a threat on your existence that you have to then fight back and go get your gun because someone said put a mask on. They also say put shoes on because we don't want your nasty ass feet walking around on our floors. They also say put a shirt on because we don't want to smell your funky armpits walking around here with whatever dripping down the sides. We don't want it. It's a place where other people are shopping. Consider them. Actually, we have more customers than you, dummy. Get out and put on a mask. I don't care if you don't like it. Sometimes I like going around I walk around my house without shoes on because that's comfortable. I don't do that when I go to someone else's place because that's their place. Start respecting other people in the place. And if you don't like it, I don't know, start growing your own corn in your backyard and eat that. Don't go to the grocery store then. There's this whole thing that we talk about, these freedoms in the country. Go and exercise some of those rather than going and ending someone else's life because they're doing their job. Their job in a position like that where they're getting it's constant type of work like this, thankless work like this, where you're under now threat of being murdered for telling someone to put on a mask because that's the store policy.
Yeah, and I'm gonna assume it wasn't her policy. Like, you crazy people. Like, you're arguing with the cashier at Trader Joe's. They didn't come up with the mask policy. They're just trying to do their job in incredibly dangerous and difficult circumstances anyway during a pandemic. So again, like these crazy right wingers spread this message, and who hurts? The working class. Not like the CEO made the decision; he shouldn't suffer at all either. But like, it is the frontline workers that are going to be victimized by these insane people. Anyway, okay, we are running low on time. I want to make sure that we can get to these. So with that, are we ready to do this?
Ready.
Okay, let's pause for 1 sec. This one's a little bit more complex, but we're good. Okay. Yeah. And now it's time for news from around the world. And meanwhile, in China, they're apparently deciding to kick out some of their Bitcoin miners. They've apparently long been home to more than half of all of the world's miners of Bitcoin. Past estimates show about 65 to 75% of Bitcoin mining happens inside of China. In May, though, the government called for a severe crackdown on Bitcoin mining and trading, setting off what's being dubbed in crypto circles as the Great Mining Migration. If you're not familiar with this mining, I wish it was you. But mining is the energy-intensive process which both creates new coins, Bitcoins, and maintains a log of all transactions of existing digital tokens. So where are they gonna go? Well, to a lot of different places. They might go to Kazakhstan, other neighboring countries, but apparently a lot of them are really jazzed about going to Texas, actually. Because despite a lack of reserves that caused days-long blackouts last winter, Texas often has some of the world's lowest energy prices, and its share of renewables is growing over time, with 20% of its power coming from wind as of 2019. It also has a deregulated power grid that lets customers choose between power providers, and crucially, its political leaders are very pro-crypto. These are dream conditions for miners. So many of them might end up going there and doing the incredibly energy-intensive cryptocurrency mining that, let's just bear in mind, seems like kind of a bad match for a power grid that right now is resulting, as you'll see in this headline, with Texans being urged to reduce cooking and cleaning so that they won't use power. They're also told, by the way, don't set your AC to anything lower than 78 because there isn't enough power for it. Like millions of homes worth of power has already been taken off the grid due to necessary maintenance. And so they're gonna be moving one of the most energy intensive industries to Texas. I understand it's a lot of independent people and companies and everything, but that just seems like a bad match at this point.
They maybe should plan that part out a little bit better. But just the whole creation, I'm sorry, and I feel like I heard Anna say this in passing the other day. I don't get it. I've read I still don't get it. What do you mean? So you're creating new coins, like literal coins? Is that what's happening? Or is this more of a digital thing? Because it also says maintains a log of all. So why say it in those terms? I'm sorry, I know I'm an old man and I don't get it.
I understand it marginally better, still not well enough. Oh, let me say, if you're watching this and you really are into crypto's the best thing ever. Don't at me. But no, it seems like a really weird.
I'm not against Bitcoin. I just don't get it. It's like, you know what? I'm not against the new light rail system that's being put in LA. I didn't build it. I don't know how it works. Doesn't mean I don't like it. I just don't know how it works. I have no idea how this works. That's all.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll see about that. Anyway, meanwhile, in me trying to throw off the director. Anyway, meanwhile in the North Pole, apparently the tipping point for irreversible climate change might have already been passed when it comes to Arctic summer ice. We have Dr. Marcus Rex. So Dr. Marcus Rex was involved in this year-long expedition of the North Pole involving hundreds of scientists. Says the disappearance of summer sea ice in the Arctic is one of the first landmines in this minefield, one of the tipping points that we set off first when we push warming too far. And one can essentially ask if we've already stepped on this mine and already set off the beginning of the explosion. So 20 different countries sent 300 different scientists for a year to the Arctic. They actually spent most of the pandemic there, which seems like a pretty good place to do it, actually. And so what's the problem? What are they finding? Well, there's way less ice than there was before. So why is that so significant? Well, it's significant because the white ice sheets which cover the Arctic help to reflect solar rays and heat back into space. This allows Earth climate to stay relatively cool, and without it, temperatures could spiral out of control. That's because as the snow and ice melt, the darker ground beneath the freezing surface absorbs more sunlight. So that is both true on ground, actual land in the Arctic. It's also true for Arctic sea ice, which reflects far more of the sunlight than the darker ocean water that it's covering. So you get less ice because of the heating, and you get more heating because of the less ice. It's a vicious cycle, as they say.
Well, I mean, all we have to do is put it in the freezer or something, right? The whole thing about not being able to revert back to what it was, I think it gets way understated, because we still see snow in Minnesota in January. It's such a small approach to a larger problem. Just pay attention to it. Like no one is attacking based off of telling you what the reality is in different places that you haven't been. So we like to criticize politicians if they don't go to the border, because they can't talk about the border issue without being at the border, to stand there with their sleeves rolled up and say, I'm at the border. But you have scientists and smart people that go and study a place like the Arctic and go and tell us what's happening there. And when they come back and tell you, I was there, this is what's happening, we go, paid off scientists.
They do.
I don't know.
It is incredibly frustrating. Oh, by the way, I was there too. We had to go quite far north to hit sea ice, by the way. It was a climate change, but it was a different thing. It wasn't that mission. But anyway, massive problem. Obviously, we like to occasionally return to this just to remind people how significant it is. Please don't forget about this with all of the other stuff that we have to deal with. Now, that said, we only have a few minutes left, but meanwhile in. Meanwhile, in Yemen, devastating information about the state of their ability to provide even basic health services to people living there, especially children. The spokesperson for Yemen's Ministry of Public Health and Population says that one child dies on average every 5 minutes in Yemen, and nearly half of their health facilities are out of service as a result of the Saudi war. By the way, for context, one child dies every 5 minutes. I did a little bit of research and I found this article from December 2016 that said, according to UNICEF, one child was dying every 10 minutes. So Despite years in which the world or the United States could have tried to do something, put some sort of diplomatic pressure on Saudi Arabia to stop this, to try to stop them, as we'll get to, from maintaining this blockade that's making it impossible for them to rebuild these facilities. It is actually twice as bad as it was just a few years ago. And that is a result of the total destruction or partial damage of 527 different hospitals. You have 8,000 women dying on a yearly basis in Yemen. More than 2.6 million children suffering from malnutrition, 1.5 million people grappling with chronic diseases. And so the issue is that if they need to go somewhere else to get medical treatments, they can't. There's a blockade. And if they need medicines and equipment and those sorts of things, they can't get it because there's a blockade. There's an acute shortage of medicine for oncology patients. And so what's left becomes rarer and more expensive as a result of it. So the US has made all this, kicked up all this sand about the fact that we're not providing some weapons and some support to Saudi Arabia, but we need to speak out in support of the people there. Diplomatic pressure to end the blockade, get Saudi Arabia to stop bombing Yemen into the rubble that we showed you.
Well, sadly, it seems to be another instance of a lack of addressing these types of things because it doesn't benefit us. Us being the powers that be, the natural progress of the country and the partnerships that we have. And honestly, a lot of us citizenry, me included, I miss a lot of this stuff. There's 35 other things that I end up paying attention to.
That's true.
You hear about the Yemeni blockade, you hear about the people in Yemen dying and children at this type of scale for this many years. And you think about it, get upset, say something, and then the next thing that just got you that hits close to the home is the thing that you're concerned about. And that's the cover that they depend on. And so this is when our government and our leaders are supposed to be, that's why we have these coalitions, groups of people that are supposed to be set aside to address these things. Because it's hard for all of us to know this and for us to push this in. Sorry, we don't have much time. Go ahead.
I know, but I appreciate what you said, and this is why we keep returning this. I can't tell you how many times we talked about this, and unfortunately, progress has been very slow. That said, Jayar, thank you as always for not only joining us on Big News Wednesday, but making it Big News Wednesday. We appreciate you being here.
I'm gonna go try and calm down because I'm still mad.
I know. I apologize for that. Some days that's the way it goes. Come back on Friday. It's always fun.
It's needed.
But anyway, for those of you watching, thank you so much, everyone who shared the stream, sent in super chats, all that. We appreciate that so much. We've got more for you though. Not only will I be joining Anna Kasparian for the second hour of the Young Turks, we've also got Dr. Rashad Ritchie and Ben Dixon who are gonna be coming up with Indisputable. You can go to youtube.com/indisputable_TYT. Definitely hit the subscribe button while you're there. That show is coming up in just a few minutes, so I hope you enjoy it. And until then, stay safe out there, stay sane out there. I'll see you soon. Thanks for listening to the full episode of The Damage Report. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, John Adarola. I'll see you soon.